Howdy, hello, and welcome to Monday Football Monday here on the SB Nation NFL Show. A reminder, very quick one before we get started, that this show is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and use code SBNNFL for a special offer when you sign up. That's code SBNNFL only at DraftKings Sportsbook. As mentioned, this is Monday Football Monday on the SB Nation NFL Show, where we love to talk about, you guessed it, the NFL. You can watch us wherever you like to watch things, on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page, on our Twitter page. Just search for SB Nation NFL wherever you want. Also search for the SB Nation NFL Show wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to us on the go on your preferred podcast platform. Subscribe, leave a rating, write a review. Those things make our hearts sing. My name is RJ Ochoa from SB Nation's Blog on the Boys, joined as always by the fantastic Rachel Prevet on the ones and twos, and back to the land from whence he came. He was out last week. He was, who knows what he was doing, but if it's anything judging by his Instagram story, he was off gallivanting somewhere from SB Nation's Arrowhead Pride, but more importantly, from deep inside your corazon. It is the one and only Congratulations to your Colorado Avalanche on winning the Stanley Cup.
They are not my Avalanche, but congratulations to Colorado. Definitely the best team. I think sometimes in the NHL, the best team doesn't always win, and the Avalanche were clearly the best team this year. I was out last week at a bachelor weekend. If you are familiar with the Netflix show Ozark, the backdrop is the Lake of the Ozarks, and come to you from Missouri. So we were out there. So. No trouble, like you might see on the show, but we had a nice time, and thank you to whoever it was that filled in. I know you guys had a great show.
Wow, how could you say whoever it was? Just dismiss Michael Peterson like that? He is the reigning MF double MVP. So you best be careful.
From time to time, I do feel for Mike. It would be nice to cover playoff football at a certain point, right?
Wow.
What? You know what I mean? I just believe it would be nice for him to do that.
He won the MF double MVP last week. Yeah. And I can tell that you did not listen to the very end of the show.
It was a great show. One of the better shows we've had here on MFM.
Well, the final seconds were filled with Michael saying, "And Pete Sweeney, you suck." I mean, that's literally kind of what he signed off with. So that's what I'm saying. It's a little obvious that, if you did listen, look, you gave us the download. That's really all we care about around here. Yeah. And you didn't listen to the show.
Look, when your season... When your season ends in mid-January every year, especially when your coach calls a timeout in a very untimely spot, you're gonna have your frustration. So I'm not gonna fire back. I'm just gonna turn the other cheek, as they say.
Mid-January used to be not the insult you just made it out to be. You know what I mean? Mid-January used to be like making the playoffs, just can't get over that first little hump, but now it's this isn't your older brother's mid-January. You know what I mean?
My insults are sharp. They keep in mind that this is now a 17-game schedule. And the weirdest part about the schedule is not the extra game. It is the mini vacation that happens after the cut and training camp. There's about just like a 2-week nothing, another 2-week nothing period after the camps end and the cuts happen and stuff like that. And it's made everything just a lot longer. I don't hate it, right? But like it is kind of weird. I don't know if you've kind of noticed that. After August, you're just waiting 2 weeks until the games start.
Well, and that's kind of where we're at right now. I would say that if there's a true off season, it is, this little, if you want to call it a month, you can, that we're in the middle of. And especially, from an entire sports perspective, now that the Stanley Cup is over, or Stanley Cup Finals are over rather, there's no NBA Finals, no Stanley Cup Finals, there's no draft of any kind, right? Even the College World Series is over, which kind of captures our attention.
When your Major League Baseball team can't cheat anymore, they can't always necessarily count on a win.
You know what, Pete? My Major League Baseball team threw a no-hitter on Saturday. I saw one of our former pitchers was off, being not very nice there in Kansas City. Zach Greinke. Did you see the comment I'm sure you saw it, but did you see this?
Yes.
Just so everybody knows, I don't want to leave people hanging. Somebody apparently asked him to sign a baseball, and he grabbed it and turned around and just chucked it as far as he could. And the person said, "Why did you do that?" And Zach said, "For my amusement." So So
he's always been an interesting cat his entire career, and
those Kansas Cityans.
Another legend of Zach Greinke story.
Anyway, so yeah, you got Major League Baseball. Cool, that's great. If you're like me, your team's good. It's nice, but College World Series is over. Wimbledon starts today, Pete. I know you're in on the Wimbledon action, the month long.
I haven't told you this. Not a huge tennis guy, admittedly, but I am making an effort here to get into what will be the Premier League starting up again next. And I picked a team, and I'm going to try to stick with it, try to go to a few games here. They got meetups here in Kansas City, so it should be fun.
Wait a minute. So you have officially picked a Premier League team? I mean, we have an episode to get to, but you can't leave people hanging. My Premier League team, it's like there's no you think it's sad when your football team sucks. When your Premier League team sucks, it's a different level sad. Glory, Man United. But Pete, was it Everton? Is that who you picked?
No, I've went through a few different teams, and
you were on a Crystal Palace run there for a little while.
Me and my group of guy friends have leaned into Tottenham. The Spurs.
Is this the group that has the Xboxes that you've talked about before?
Yeah, I mean, when I really want to turn back the clock to my high school version of myself, get on the Xbox. We can play like little FIFA, PGA Tour, but we're like, look, we want to go to these meetups together, maybe get some gear, and the Tottenham group is officially affiliated with Tottenham.
So you got a nice little bar, pub area. You can go have a watch party.
Good spot. So it's exciting, and I'm going to really try to actually follow it as best I can this year. And it's nice too, right? Because we're working, and this is just pulling the curtain back a little bit. We work pretty much all of Sunday, no matter what time our team plays. This is a thing that usually we'll do on Saturdays. That's kind of cool.
That's cool. I'm really happy for you, Pete. There's nothing like a crisp, kind of fall morning where you go out. You need the long sleeve under your kit. You head on over to the pub. I will say, being a Premier League fan, sometimes you got to get up early. You know what I mean? So just be wary of that. And you know what? Tottenham, probably the easiest step to make if you're an NFL fan, because you got the stadium crossover. It's low-hanging fruit. So I'm happy for you. I hope Harry Kane leaves, but I'm happy for you.
Don't say that, right? I mean, we don't want that.
This is a World Cup podcast, by the way, come this fall. But anyway, so because this is kind of the driest part of the year when it comes to NFL action, because as soon as training camp kicks off, it's boom, 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 boom. I mean, you got things happening, storylines, unfortunately, injuries.
Speaking of the NFL, we should say this before we start. We're less than a month from. I know that Kansas City is opening within the month, and it's all. If you go to the dates, it's pretty much everybody will be open within a month of us talking this morning, which is just wild. Where does the time go every year? And then we're going to blink and it's going to be Thanksgiving.
It's I feel like high school graduation. You know what I mean? Like just it's crazy.
We remember all the times we've had together.
Who sings
as
that?
Our lives
Is that Natasha
from
Bedingfield?
Whatever, we will still be friends forever.
The song I was thinking of was I don't know the lyrics, but the Time of Our Lives song by
time.
Again, totally different song as far as graduation is concerned.
Let you all into the world.
Anyway, all right. So there are two major dominoes yet to fall. Speaking of dominoes, we tried a domino show with Kansas City and Eric Stone Street. It was not great, but Eric is awesome.
Sure.
But there were some discussions, Pete, as the weekend kind of began, that different reports, Wall Street Journal involved here. Obviously, there's been a lot of reporting about Deshaun Watson, and this isn't, frankly, a pretty gross thing to talk about, but it is a very, very large shift that the NFL season could take relative to the football being played. But it appears, Pete, at least the NFL is trying to push this message, this narrative that they are pushing for a year-long suspension at minimum of Deshaun Watson, and preferring some sort of indefinite suspension or a right to revisit it in the event that more accusers come out, more lawsuits are filed against Deshaun Watson. The league obviously is highly concerned about its high mark of integrity, and doesn't want to punish Deshaun Watson only for something else to come up and then have to go through this entire process again. Do you think that is possible? I know that, people float out, he should never play again, all sorts of things. But, are we talking about an actual year-long suspension? Or do you think it's the NFL trying to push that so that whenever it is hypothetically 10 games, 12 games, it looks like, the NFL was kind of caught, but they really wanted a year-long suspension.
Yeah, no, like I think you always got to start with like this story continues to be gross, and we're
Right.
just talking about the logistics of the NFL, which matters less, but it is going to come up because eventually he's going to play in a football game again. I do believe that. I think what has gotten a little bit lost in this story is the fact that like unofficial off the record conversations not only happen between like reporters and NFL executives and whatnot, but they can happen with NFL ownership and, for example, the league's office, right? And I just think the way that this contract was structured, the Cleveland Browns knew that it was likely he was not going to be available for 2022. That's why you saw them structure it the way they did. That's why the money that he's going to make the first year comes a lot from the signing bonus, which is not on a game by game basis, and he doesn't really lose that much money for anything in 2022. So I think they knew that. So when at the beginning of this, it seemed like maybe it could be 6 games, and people were like over under 5.5 games. I was like, you got to go over. It's going to be over because I think that they were eyeing something close to a year. Now, since the trade happened, it has gotten a little bit more complicated. More suits have come out. You've seen more and more women stemming from the HBO Real Sports have their arms up in air, and there's been suits added. I know 20 have been settled. I believe there's 4 or 5 still out there. So what that leads you to believe is like it's ongoing. And I think a lot of people want an answer, especially by the time training camp opens up, which is within a month, and the NFL has to come down with some kind of decision. And I think it has to be indefinite. And I think that they kind of always knew that it might have to be indefinite. And it just makes me question and wonder out loud, like, why go through the process of having a lot of these teams that were interested, fans up in arms, and you lose fans by their interest in Watson, and especially Cleveland fans. If everything that you kind of hear out of the Cleveland fan base right now is some fans are just trying their best to look past it. Others don't even really want to be Browns fans anymore. There's certainly a bad taste surrounding the organization. I think if you always knew that this could be indefinite, why didn't you just do it last year or before he was traded? And, rather than him actually coming to the Houston facility, he would just be in Houston now, tied to them until he was clear. And then you could do, all of this. I think, the NFL is trying here in the last minute, the last hour to really, I think, put on a good face. But in a lot of ways, to me, it's too late for that. And it's so muddled and it's so messy, and it remains gross. And so, I do think they'll go after an indefinite suspension, and the NFLPA is doing what it has to do, right? This is part of it, and they're going to fight that, and it'll be interesting to see where they land.
So, in case anyone's unaware, the NFLPA has basically come out and said that they're going to aggressively defend Deshaun if it comes to that, whatever suspension is levied against him, and cite a lack of precedent, and cite, for lack of better words, the hypocrisy of the NFL to suspend Deshaun Watson, given all sorts of allegations. Right. I mean, allegations doesn't properly cover it, but against the likes of Dan Snyder, Robert Kraft, Jerry Jones, obviously Robert Kraft's, we'll call it a situation from a few years ago. I don't think situation encompasses what Dan Snyder's dealing with. The voyeurism scandal the Cowboys were connected to this offseason. And I know a lot of people feel like that's gross of the NFLPA to sort of vehemently defend Deshaun. That's their job. I mean, you mentioned it. Like their job is to work for and on behalf of the players. You asked the question. I think it's a good one. I think it's kind of the question the NFL is ducking over and over and over again. Like, why didn't you? Why was he never added to the commissioner's exempt list, right? Like, I don't think anybody knew what that was until circa whatever it was 2014, when Adrian Peterson and Greg Hardy just kind of, the NFL magically said, we're putting them on this list, right? We've got this list where we can put players on. They won't count. They'll get paid, whatever. They just go away. And I think it highlights really. And I don't get into these, like, I know you see this, Pete, like, there's a lot of Cowboys fans. Oh, the NFL hates Jerry Jones. Roger Goodell hates Jerry Jones. Oh, he's always going to do whatever he can to hurt the Cowboys, whatever. I don't know about that, but I do think it highlights how the NFL really dismissed the Houston Texans, because they're not a Tiffany, franchise of the NFL. They're sort of one of the runts of the litter. The NFL just let them kind of sit and toil a year ago. Let David Culley sit and toil and just kind of force them to deal with it. I mean, he was just inactive, right? Like that's literally what he was all year long, just inactive, didn't show up to games. I mean, like didn't practice. Like that is a really, crummy situation that the Texans had to deal with. And I don't think anybody's really, thought about that. And I say that, under or with the, reality that the Texans may be connected to some sort of allowance of Deshaun's actions. I know that those are part of the accusations involved here. So assuming that's not true, and you can't assume anything here, I think to answer your question, I've gone a long ways here. I think the NFL and the Cleveland Browns grossly underestimated the integrity of the public and just thought it would go away. I think they thought like, oh, we'll deal with 24 hours and a weekend of criticism and whatever and lambasting, and then it'll go away and people will talk about, the Browns and their success and whatever, and we won't have to deal with this anymore. And that didn't happen. And I think that now they're trying to react to it, that's how they are. They're a reactionary league.
When this stuff started coming out, and Watson wasn't even really, if you want to say he was a member of the Texans last year, I mean, that's a stretch. He was barely even a member of a team, barely even a member of any team. I think last year when all this stuff started to emerge and it became clear that he was going to be in a lot of these suits, and you're going to have to see how they had the results of each and every one of the suits. I think last year was the right time to throw him on the commissioner's exempt list. And it is, as you were saying, in a lot of ways, a magical list. It's like a presidential pardon. There's really like a no questions asked aspect to it.
If you were president, Pete, and I committed a crime and I asked you, would you pardon me?
Probably not. Probably not. No.
Wow.
Yeah, no.
Wow.
So what I would say is, you're right. And the commissioner's list should happen last year, and he would hypothetically now, as we look back, and hindsight is 2020, but it seemed obvious to me at the time, but he would, looking back, still be on it, and he would still be on the Texans, and trade talks wouldn't have happened, and the Cleveland Browns wouldn't be in this bind where I don't know if they knew all of the information about more and things coming out, and the New York Times article connecting him to 66 masseuses, even if there are 20 some odd lawsuits. And then in a way, you already have your indefinite suspension because that is seemingly an indefinite list. It's a problem now, and you wonder what's going to happen. But I think to its fault, the NFL made its own problem in a lot of ways by not enacting that list last year.
I think another key element or variable. You're right. I mean, I don't think anybody, and I know I speak for you, Pete. I don't think anybody feels bad for the NFL or feels bad for the Cleveland Browns. These are beds that they made that they have to lie in. But the NFL has painted themselves into a corner here where they have to come down with like an iron fist, so to speak. Especially the variable I was getting at is they suspended Calvin Ridley for a year, right? Like you can talk about the morality of gambling, whether you or anybody else is okay with that. I mean, it's obviously legal in many states, and further and further, sports gambling is becoming more legalized across the country. I know that's a neighborhood that you're a little bit more well versed in, Pete. But I mean, I think the NFL has had an ability to kind of get away with what they want for a very long time. And I think that if they were to suspend Calvin Ridley for a year for gambling, and I mean, the element of him gambling on the Falcons is just one leg of a parlay. It's not like, week in and week out he was gambling straight up on the Falcons or something. Again, you could debate the morality of this all you want. But if they were to come down, that swiftly, that hardly on him, and then let Deshaun Watson skate by after all this, the level of, it's not even egg on their face. I mean, like it would, the level of gross would, I think, be impossible to overcome, and that's where they're stuck. And I don't think anybody says it, but like the NFL doesn't want to suspend Deshaun Watson because he's a great player and he can provide great entertainment. He can play in great games and have great moments. And I know people, when you talk about his football, people say, well, the last team he was on wasn't very good. And I'm not trying to sit here and debate where Deshaun Watson ranks among NFL quarterbacks, but the reality is he makes one of their teams better. He makes their product better. They want him involved. They want those storylines churning all season long, so they don't want to have to take that away. They don't want those storylines to go away, but they're stuck. I mean, I don't know how you can expect anything less than a season at this point.
I think it's going to be the year. I think the NFLPA will fight like hell to get rid of the indefinite clause, but I think there's a lot of reason to have that. And it's an easy point to make because it is still ongoing. And I just think no move should have been made until all of these reached a conclusion, even if that was going to be in 2023 or 2024, if it goes through the courts and whatnot. And that's just the reality of the situation. And if you're trying to point of like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? I think you've come up with it. I think it really was the NFL and to an extent Cleveland, and I think to an extent Houston thinking, once we ship them off, it'll go away. Well, you have the New York Times article that connected some of the Houston allowing some of this weird stuff to happen. Cleveland thought it would go away. Then all of a sudden there were more suits stemming from the HBO special that really, kind of opened the eyes of folks a little bit more. And then now you have the NFL that is looking like it has egg all over its face because now we are within a month of training camp and they got to come up with something. And now you have the NFLPA that's saying, well, it better not be unfair. And so it's a mess. It is a gigantic mess. We think that something will come down by the time training camps open, because I think if Cleveland camp opens, you're not going to necessarily want to have Deshaun Watson just available to throw, right, as he goes through the remaining suits. And so I don't know how this ends, but it does seem like there is a real legitimate fight brewing between the NFL and NFLPA. Yeah.
The hearing, the NFL related hearing is set to begin tomorrow on Tuesday. So you're right. It does kind of feel like an answer is, I don't want to say around the corner, but certainly as close as it's been. Especially when Deshaun's trade to Cleveland was 5:00 news dumped on a Friday.
Right.
I think it was NFL Media's Greg Rosenthal that tweeted something like, if you have to 5:00 news dump the acquisition of your franchise quarterback, something is very wrong with your team. Because if there's one thing you want to like celebrate, it's like, hey, we have this face of the future, whatever. But in the sense of 5:00 news dumps happening, this is the weekend leading into July 4th of July. So you would think that this would be the time. This is what a lot of people have been saying. The end of June. This is a very popular window for the NFL to drop some news like this.
In media strategy, there is not a better day on the calendar this year than Friday to drop news, because a lot of people are getting off Thursday to begin with, and some Friday, but then you have the 4th, which doesn't happen until Monday, and so a lot of people are getting the day after that as well. So I mean, you could be looking at 5 full days before the people are like back at work and into NFL news, and by then, I mean, 5 days in the NFL, I mean, you could write a biblical scroll worth of news that just drops at any point in the NFL, even in what is considered the dead period. So if you're ever looking for the perfect Friday news dump on this calendar, it's July 1, which is coming up in a few days here.
Just so everyone is clear, he is on Twitter at PG Sweeney, because it sounds like Pete's dropping his bad news this Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Maybe he's becoming a Colorado Avalanche fan. Who knows? Pete, you mentioned it. The NFL machine moves and moves and moves and moves. There's stories and stories and stories and stories. And this one had kind of gone away. The other kind of main talking point for us here today. Alvin Kamara, New Orleans Saints running back, one of the better running backs in the NFL, obviously. I think we forgot that, like, during the Pro Bowl, it was reported, like, literally as the game was happening, it was reported that during the weekend, he was questioned and arrested. Or again, I might be having the timeline wrong, but for being involved, just a really terrible situation for Alvin Kamara. The allegations here, felony battery, that he reportedly, Kamara told police that he threw a couple of punches, and he is reportedly bracing for a 6-game suspension. So if he has that kind of crystal clear identification as far as what's coming down the bend, it would stand to reason that Alvin Kamara is going to be missing the first 6 games of the season.
Yeah, that seems to be right, and that seems to follow suit. I know not to connect the two because they're very, very different allegations and whatnot, but with Deshaun and his stuff is a little bit unprecedented, right. Whereas Kamara, you can kind of look at previous things and games and levels of suspension. I think probably starts with 4, and I could see as many as 8, but 6 does feel right. Maybe it's 8 and he gets it down to 6, or maybe it's 6 and he appeals down to 4. But that does seem like right in the window for the situation that he has found himself in. Yes.
So the Saints are in a very interesting season. P, like, is Dennis Allen's job in jeopardy in your mind?
No. I think he gets.
I
think he
I
gets at
could
least
see,
2
like,
years.
if you're asking me who's like a one and done coach from this year, I could see Dennis Allen, being in that group.
I think he gets at least 2 years, especially if they can teeter around 500 or be above 500, especially with what is a big time change here of the guard. But I tend to think he'll get the extra year. I think the New Orleans organization is going to want to see this team in the playoffs by 2023, so that'll be more of a challenge for next year. But I think he gets a shot here to really become and implant himself as the true head coach of New Orleans, as Sean Payton readies himself for the Dallas Cowboys next year.
The Saints' first games, they start off actually. This is stupid. I hadn't totally realized this. I don't know if you know this, Pete. Saints' first 3 games of the season, at the Falcons, Buccaneers week 2, at the Panthers. 3 straight divisional games to start the season, 2 of which are on the road. That's really dumb.
They own Tampa Bay. That smells like 3-0 to me. You get Mariota, you get Brady, who you own, right? I mean, Trevor Siemian beat Brady, and then you got Carolina Panthers, who Sam Darnold. So I'm seeing 3-0 for the Saints to start the year.
Week 4 against the Minnesota Vikings. Week 5 against the Seattle Seahawks.
Give me Winston over Kirk every day.
Week 5 against Drew Lock. So you're
5-0.
You're
telling me the 5-0 Dennis Allen Saints are going to fire him after 1 year? Come on.
And then week 6 against the reigning AFC champions, the Cincinnati Bengals. So.
Okay, I see what you're doing here. You're trying to really curb my enthusiasm. I don't love it, but I like the strategy.
I mean, I'm just like, that's a very different stretch of games without Alvin Kamara.
It is. It is, and as you're
talking 3 division games, 2 of which are on the road, a game against the AFC champions, and a game against the Vikings, who I think are better than most people want to give them credit for.
Hey, fantasy heads, Tony Jones season, right? Finally.
I mean, that's true. Like, you see this all the time, but like the fantasy impact of Alvin Kamara being out is seismic. I mean. He'll get drafted. A lot of people will stash him right until he's back. But, I mean, the fantasy season is, 16 weeks generally? I mean, so you're talking about you're losing almost half of it.
Yeah, it depends on how your league is set up. I know there's the tight end premium and all kinds of settings you can put in there.
So, obviously the Deshaun Watson story is one of the biggest ones in the NFL. Like, where do you rank? Where do you place the Alvin Kamara story? Is it anywhere near the top, or is it just kind of?
Well, I think for this time of year, it's at the top. And these stories during we call it the dead month, right? These stories typically are at the top because there's not a ton of NFL news. Like if your team was in the NFL news cycle during this period, it's either the only good news is really like contracts coming to an end, like a contract negotiation finally coming through, or bad news. And this is at the top right now in the grand scheme of the NFL. Do I feel like this story on a running back, as good as Kamara is, matters? No, I don't know if this will necessarily impact the Saints season in the sense of like costing them the playoffs, because I don't think they're a playoff team with him anyway. So it's up there for now, but I don't see this impacting the NFL season as a whole all that much.
Wow. Pete hates the Saints.
I don't hate the Saints. I don't hate the Saints.
It sounds like.
No, I'm a Winstonite. I like famous Jameis. He was playing some good football before the injury last year. Hopefully he can turn around. I know that you're not rooting for him since you're a big Andy Dalton guy, stemming from his good time in Dallas there. But I'll stick with Winston here.
Are there any more dominoes that you feel like the league is waiting on, the season is waiting on to fall before, that need to happen before training camp starts, so to speak? Because I think there's one more obvious one, but I'm curious if you have any.
There's we're in Kansas City waiting on Orlando Brown Jr. I feel like the left tackle of Patrick Mahomes maybe isn't getting a ton of national buzz, but it matters here. I don't know if there's any other dominoes that necessarily need to fall. What was the one that you were thinking of?
Baker Mayfield. I mean, I know that's connected to Deshaun Watson, but
sure.
I don't know, like if
Baker Mayfield. Did you see that Eric Johnson woke up with the Stanley Cup in bed?
I mean,
I'm seeing that come
that's
through.
a really common thing. I feel like people, like the morning after they win a title of some kind, like have some sort of photo, like with the trophy, like it's happened with the Ryder Cup
This
before. Like,
video, I mean, this is the only reason I bring it up because not to say that this will happen, but this is such a Russ move, right? Couldn't you see Russ in bed with the Lombardi?
did you
If
see
they were to
his
take it
his
down,
latest? Speaking of
drunk as
Russ,
country. That's right.
no, his latest one was very, 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 very corporate. I'm pulling it
Oh,
up actually right now. Well, first, actually, his latest tweet is celebrating his new neighbors that the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup.
do you think that if he joined Dallas, it would be Cowboys Nation giddy up, and he would say that after every press conference?
No, he would do a horse neigh like you. Let's see, like do the Russell Wilson horse neigh.
Okay, Cowboys Nation.
That's your dolphin.
No,
That's your dolphin. It's okay. It's
it
okay. You messed
it
up.
can be a horse can be a cousin of a dolphin in a lot of ways. Very smart animals.
So he tweeted on Sunday. I'm just gonna read it. On top of the mountain, overlooking the sea. ... Thanks,
No.
Monaco. Anytime, any place, we work! Exclamation point. Winning in all caps is a habit, but the word habit, Pete, the H is capitalized. So like he's like emphasizing the word habit. Then a soccer ball emoji, a football ball emoji, and then grateful for team, and then he tagged AS Monaco. So
Third best quarterback in the AFC West.
really, really pretty environment that it looked like Russell was playing in. I'll say this: the guy knows how to vacation. You know what I mean? Like I'll give him that.
Right.
But
Well,
yeah.
as you know, RJ son is a habit. So
Anyway, what I was gonna ask you, last question: if Baker Mayfield were to be traded today, like before we get an answer on Deshaun,
yeah,
what would that suggest to you? Like that the Browns feel like they're going to have Deshaun back at some point in time, or do you feel like it is disconnected from that? Like they're two separate things.
We know everything about. I mean, what Baker Mayfield is about. He's not playing for Cleveland again. And I think that's what's making this take so long is because Cleveland wants proper compensation for what is one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the world, right? He is a starting quarterback. We don't know where we necessarily put him. I wouldn't put him really bury him last. I don't know. For me, it would probably be in like the 15 to 20 range, which is still a pretty good quarterback in the NFL. So Cleveland wants proper compensation, but everyone in the world, including everyone in Carolina and everyone in Seattle, knows that he ain't playing for you anymore.
Right.
And
So if he were to be traded today, like you would feel like this is a separate thing from this has no bearing. This is no indication as far as what's going to happen with Deshaun.
I don't think. I mean, I think the Browns know that Mayfield will never play a game for them again. I think everybody knows that, and so yeah, I think it's become separate just because of the way that Mayfield is. I think there is a maybe a way to get out of it, but it would involve like an unprecedented payment or change of the final year of his contract, like sign Baker to a new 1-year deal for 2023 where you're paying him more money and just for the 1 year. And he came out and say, we've come to this resolution where they're going to pay me as a rental in a sense for 1 year. And I'm going to do it because they're overpaying me in that way. There's no way the Browns do that. I'm just saying this would be like a grand hypothetical. I think he eventually ends up traded for a lot less than Cleveland wants because it'd be silly to have him just sitting in the building doing nothing, in my opinion, which is what will happen if he remains on the club.
Last thing before we hand out our award here, a statement from Tony Busby was just released, Pete. The first case has officially been filed against the Houston Texans. We mentioned that subplot to all of this is no longer a subplot. The statement reads, today we filed the first case of what will likely be many against the Houston Texans related to Deshaun Watson's behavior. Suffice it to say, the overwhelming evidence collected indicating that the Houston Texans enabled Watson's behavior is incredibly damning. We believe the Texans knew or most certainly should have known of Watson's conduct. Beyond that, we believe the filing speaks for itself. This isn't in the statement, but I continue to feel just very badly for David Culley. I mean, the dude was really, and just awful situation that he was having to lead last year in Houston. Potentially awful, toxic, hazardous, work environment as well.
Yeah, no, I think this speaks to your point that we made earlier. And it was an overlook by Houston, the NFL, and Cleveland altogether, and really to an extent like the Atlantas and the New Orleans who were interested in Deshaun. everyone thought the trade would happen, and we're in the off
Poof.
season. By the
Yeah.
time September's here, this will go quietly into the night, and more and more and more and more every day, it is the opposite. It is not going anywhere, and there is going to be something that comes down and out of this, and I don't know. What? How does this end? Right? Is this a situation where eventually Deshaun maybe doesn't
I
play
I
again?
I
don't
don't
know.
think it's inconceivable to say that he never plays again in the NFL. I really don't. I
There's a
mean,
non-zero chance of that, right?
yeah.
And it just I don't think the NFL ever thought that was a possibility. I think it's too late now to realize that, and you're seeing the result of that.
I don't know how the Browns didn't foresee this again. I mean, and every step of the way, the NFL, the Browns. I mean, the Texans haven't been connected to him since the trade, so you can't really put them here. But
Right.
they have only made things worse. You know what I mean? Like, right, like by trying to like arrogantly dismiss it, like we did our due diligence, things like that. Like all you have done is again like deep in the hole that you are in. And I mean, I don't think anybody's sitting here feeling badly for the Browns or for the NFL or for the Texans if these allegations are true. And certainly for Deshaun, that's what I feel really badly for David Culley. Like, you know what I mean? Like he was hired a year ago by this organization, and left a deal like that. That's what I meant earlier. Like David Culley, really specifically, if the Texans are implicated here, I mean, how is that fair of the NFL to let David Culley just toil like that, like to have to awkwardly handle having a player of Deshaun Watson's football talent be inactive and just sit there and answer the same questions and just be this puppet of the clown show that was happening there that they created. It's a really ugly thing that they did to David Culley, and then that the Texans got away with firing him this year. Like, it's just really sad.
Well, if you really look at the details around it, and you look at the contract that Culley got, it sets up as a lame duck head coach, right? Remember they wanted.
But there's a difference between like, okay, like come coach the I don't know. I mean, every team that's kind of been connected to tanking has had some allegations levied against them, like Hugh Jackson's Browns, Brian Flores' Dolphins. So I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but it's one thing to just come like execute the tank of losing football games. That's one thing. But like David Culley, again, how was it fair to ask him to answer all of the questions about Deshaun Watson when the league didn't answer a single one?
Yeah, no, and I agree. But what I'm telling you is like, you got to like follow the money to
right.
Some
No,
extent,
I mean,
right?
you're right.
So they gave him was a pretty lucrative contract, right? It was for multiple years and for I think in the range of 20 million, if I'm remembering correctly. And they knew he was going to be 1 year. They wanted Josh McCown all along. Our guy in Houston, Mr. Jack, made that very clear in a lot of different ways that they wanted McCown. The NFL was facing certain situations where the diversity question had been coming into play. The Texans pivoted, and instead of hiring a head coach with absolutely no experience, they hired what they always knew, in my opinion, was going to be this 1 year head coach. And in a way, they gave him this lucrative deal that'll pay him for the X remainder of years of the contract, even though he was fired. This retirement,
Right.
type of fund. And it was just this grand thing where the NFL, like, always, they think the news cycle is going to take care of it, right? Like, and it doesn't as much anymore because people don't forget and people try to hold, I think organizations accountable. I think social media in a lot of ways has changed the game in that sense. And now in these two NFL cities and really the league as a whole, this is getting messier and messier by the day, whereas they thought it was going to get it cleaned up by the day. The opposite is happening, and I think you're seeing a result of all that.
Remember when the messiest thing that happened between these two teams was the Texans salary dumping Brock Osweiler, and that
Right.
being against NFL rules, like that wasn't like allowed the way it was in the NBA. So
Right.
Interesting times.
Don't even tell me about the salary cap dumping in the NBA with this Duren situation and with the Knicks. And I think the Knicks. I think the Knicks are just going to be bad until I perish. And I'm in my 30s, right? So I'm, if, knock on wood, I'd like to last
Well, I
at least
mean,
another 50
if
years
you're
here. And
if you're getting up early, like that's the thing. Like the Knicks have pushed you to the point where you're willing to get up at 6 a.m. and go to the pub on a Saturday. You know what I mean? To watch
right,
a
I don't
different team.
even want to know
By the way,
what the Knicks
Tottenham
are
is
doing.
like the Knicks of the Premier League. Just so you're aware. I mean, as far as heartache and heartbreak is concerned.
Yeah, not anymore. We got it. We got some new blood. Watching on Saturdays in KC.
The time has come, Pete. We need to welcome in the fantastic, the incomparable, the perfect in every way, Rachel Prevet. Rachel, welcome to your show, Monday Football Monday. Thank you, Rachel. Pete was giving me some shoe advice over the weekend. So Rachel, thank you for that.
Shoe advice.
Yeah, I take interest in Rachel's interests and understand where she's elite. Her skills, her assets, and so I humbly ask for help when I need it. So
a friend of a friend had these brand new like Looney Tune shoes. I am not a sneakerhead, but these were wild. I mean, they were multiple colors. They were Looney Tune shoes.
No shoes are ever multiple colors. Very interesting.
Like those Nickelodeon W.
Pete, now is Rachel's moment. Please be humble yourself. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I apologize for Pete.
But I did appreciate
number one, Rachel, how is your day going? Number two, who's your MF double MVP? And number three, why?
Today, so far, it's going pretty well. First thing I've done this morning. So, chugging along. I think today, we've never did this before. I've never did this before.
No, don't do it.
Don't do it. I'd rather lose. Pete, Rachel, we're competitive. There has to be a winner here. There has to be a winner. There has to be a loser. That's the spirit of MF double MVP.
You know who RJ is going to vote for, right? My vote will count for 1.5 today if it needs to.
Rachel, my vote is for you, just so that we're very clear.
I didn't even do anything.
Rachel, we're sorry. Go with your original point. Go with your heart.
My original point today, just based off of the topics alone, I was gonna say it's a tie. There was nobody did better. You guys were just sharing your points, So I don't think there's a win or loser today.
Well, I mean, RJ set up the rundown, so I'm sorry that it played out like that. So I think he loses points there, and I, really came out firing, and so I'm gonna vote for myself, my 1.5 votes. So congratulations to
Rachel. I just have one question. When has Pete set up the rundown?
I don't know. Actually.
I did it 2 weeks ago, and it was a great show.
When you were out, RJ, he did.
That's right.
He did with Steven.
I can count it. I can count the day within 2 weeks. Yeah, it was a great rundown that day.
And then actually, I didn't tell you this, Rachel. He sent it to me. He was so proud that he sent it to me.
I wanted you to see. I wanted you to see my hard work. It was a great show too. Yeah, we came up with the top 10 headlines that actually matter heading into the 2022 NFL season.
Rachel, the floor is yours. Say whatever you want. Condemn the Browns, condemn Deshaun Watson. Go off. This is yours, and then send us home.
I'm talking about all this stuff because it just makes me sick.
Totally with you.
Happening in the world right now, and I just think that sometimes you have to unplug, and it's stuff like this that makes you want to step away. So I don't even. I'm speechless. I don't have anything to say.
When you step away, Rachel, you look good in your shoes. I mean, any step you take, we will be there every little step we take. We'll be together every little step. Oh! We'll see you next week.
Sorry, everybody. I apologize on our behalf.